Very, very. Perhaps you can hear me. I hope.
Well, clearly there is a major operation going on at the Westin Copley Hotel in the heart of Boston. It is unclear. I think it is fair to say it is unclear exactly what this SWAT team is in that hotel looking for, what they believe is in there. Let me just focus on what we do know for a second. We do know that some number of suspects, that we don't know how many. I don't want to use the word suspect here because police aren't. Some people have been taken into custody. It's not even clear to us that they've been arrested. They are in custody, and law enforcement officials are not calling them suspects, at least not yet, simply suggesting that they may have information that is relevant. That is in Boston. There is another group, we don't know how many, of people in custody. Again, this is in South Florida. We don't know how many, and we don't know precisely why law enforcement agents believe they may have information or may in some way be connected to what is going on in Boston. Boston, of course, was the origination point for flights involved in this incident yesterday in the hijackings. There were also reports in Boston some time back that there was some small number of people who may have been involved in a terrorist cell somehow connected to Osama bin Laden. That was a report some months ago. Bill Delaney, our Boston bureau chief, helped me on this a bit. Bill, I believe I have that right, and absolutely correct me if I don't.
And earlier this year it was that the FBI said that in the late 90s, 2 Arab men had suddenly left Boston in 1998. One of them had been a cab driver here for 15 years. The other had been here for a shorter period of time, but both, the FBI said, had ties to Osama bin Laden. Now, interestingly, the man, the taxi driver who had lived here for 15 years, Bassem Khanj, his name was subsequently killed in Lebanon in an attack on the Lebanese army that was believed to be financed and driven by Osama bin Laden. The other man is presently in a Jordanian jail. He was arrested on the eve of the millennium for planning an attack on a hotel in Jordan that largely served American and Israeli tourists. Now, the FBI at the time said they couldn't say for certain whether these men were here actively working as a terrorist cell, if you will, for Osama bin Laden, or whether they were just living here for a period of time to raise money or whatever. And as I said, in 1998, they left, the FBI saying they left suddenly at that time. So there are antecedents for the possibility of some kind of cell here that may have laid some kind of groundwork for this boarding of these airplanes yesterday that led to the hijackings that led to those horrific crashes into the World Trade Center. Aaron, a lot of information flying around here, but we do know for certain that there was some sort of an Osama bin Laden terrorist cell here just a couple years ago.
Okay, there is indeed a lot of information flying around, and trying to grab it out of the air and make sense of these floating pieces of information is the task of the moment. Back to Kelly Rita in Washington. Kelly's been working the Justice Department and her sources there. Kelly?
Right, our sources, law enforcement sources, are telling us, as I reported just earlier, that there are people in custody in both Boston and in southern Florida. Now, what in custody means is not clear at this point. These were not described as suspects. They were described as people who may provide material information in this case. As you know, the FBI is working off of the flight manifest, the passenger lists, trying to cross-reference those lists with people who may have been red flags for the INS, also checking that against registration lists over at flight schools, because Justice has said that on each of these flights that were hijacked, there were between 3 and 5 hijackers, and at least one of them had to be trained to fly commercial aircraft, very sophisticated aircraft, and that the only place you can get that kind of training is either here in the United States or in Europe. And so they are checking with flight schools. We do know that they're over at Huffman Aviation School in Venice, Florida. FBI investigators are there talking to school administrators, focusing, it seems, on one student in particular. I have not been able to obtain that person's name at this time. And we also know that there were investigators at another school, flight school in Florida, doing just the same thing. So there's a lot of cross-referencing. There's a lot of loose hairs that they're trying to bring together. But I must caution you that so far, this investigation is at its very early stages. Obviously, this just happened yesterday. While there are some good leads and while there have been some good information that they've gathered, there really is nothing very solid at this point to go on, to really pin this on any one group or one person. For example, there was a car that was impounded by the FBI yesterday in Boston. It did have what law enforcement sources describe as very useful information. That car has been linked to people who boarded one of the flights out of Boston that was indeed hijacked. But again, nothing solid to go on, just useful, positive information was the quote given to me. We are progressing here, but this is something that could take months, if not years, to solve.
That last point is a good one. I mean, at one level, we see this flurry of activity, and we wonder what it all means. It's police now coming out, this SWAT team in Boston coming out of the Westin Copley Hotel. As I look at our monitor, we see a fair number of officers coming out. We do not see, or we can't see, and it's possible that you can see this more clearly than I, whether they are bringing anyone out with them, but it doesn't look like it to me. They're coming out quite slowly. They went into the building quite slowly. They did not evacuate the area, and as you saw, there were dozens, if not hundreds of people who had gathered around the hotel and had not been moved back by this SWAT team. No police line had been set up, fair amount of milling around in front of the hotel, but if they found something or someone, it is not apparent to us as we look at the pictures with you. George Terwilliger is familiar with these sort of security operations. I believe he's in our Washington bureau. Mr. Terwilliger, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine.
Tell me what you see, what you know, and what you think right now.
Well, I think what these police activities and law enforcement activities show is that the investigation to determine who is responsible for these cowardly acts is progressing and progressing nicely. The fact of the matter is, though, that the object of all of this is not to arrest people and bring them to trial and charge them with crimes, even though that may happen. If there are people here who supported this operation and were involved in it, co-conspirators, there may be prosecutions. But the real objective here, I believe, has to be to fix responsibility in the big picture sense with persons overseas who sponsored, directed, and basically commissioned
because those are the people,
these crimes.
Those are the people who ultimately the government wants to get, wants to punish, wants to put out of business.
Well, that's exactly right, but it's more than punishment. The put out of business part is critical. What we have here, what's been demonstrated to us, is that there is a fundamental threat to the security of the United States that is represented by the activity that took place yesterday. The job of government, the core function of government, is to provide for the security of the country, and that threat has to be neutralized.
Mr. Terwilliger, let me, this is slightly off point, I apologize. But I wonder, sir, if other groups, and there probably aren't very many in the world, but there are a few, will be emboldened by what this one group was able to pull off.
We leave Boston's Westin Hotel there and CNN's coverage and take you back to the center of Manhattan and ABC America.
Nothing's normal there. Everything is just blown apart.
And there have been some rescues, but you haven't found many bodies, have you?
That's correct.
Do you have any idea why?
No, not right now. There's so much rubble, and some of the steel is so heavy, there's just no way a human being can pick it up. You have to get heavy equipment in there. It just takes time.
And you're actually picking it up by hand?
Yes. Yes, well, there's numerous people up there, firefighters, police officers, not just from New York, but from all over the area, outside the state. And they're up there, everybody's grabbing, you know, heavy steel. You're talking like 10, 20 guys at a shot, picking it up and throwing it, and just keep on going and keep digging and digging and digging. And that's what they're doing.
And about how much longer do you think you'll stay here working on the site?
We'll probably stay here until we drop tonight. That's what we'll do. We've been here since 12. We haven't stopped yet. We just took a little break, and then we're going to go back up again.
Well, thank you for your work.
You're welcome.
Peter?
Thanks very much, George. I just want to take a quick look at Boston again now, because that's an unresolved situation. We just punch up the Nothing at the Westin Hotel at Topley Square, but we're outside that hotel at the moment, and we'll keep on top of exactly what is happening there. We know that SWAT team has gone inside. We have no serious appreciation of what has happened inside, but as John Miller was just pointing out, these guys have gone in, have been ready before they arrived on the scene, and have gone in either on a legitimate tip or on something else, or maybe even the suspicion of something else. What I find interesting is so many people so close to the hotel. I don't know what that suggests, a relaxed atmosphere or not. We have on the telephone at the moment Jacqueline Galligan. Ms. Galligan, can you hear me? Where, may I ask, are you calling from?